Tonight you're going to want to go outside, and tonight we're hoping for clear skies, and tonight you will find, depending on where you are, a near total lunar eclipse sometime later this evening after dark. And here to tell us about that and everything else in our celestial skies is Jim Lattis, former director of the UW Space Place, former manager of the Washburn Observatory, and a recently retired faculty associate in astronomy at the UW-Madison College of Letters and Sciences. And if you have a question about what you're seeing in the skies, we welcome you to our conversation this hour. Join us at 1-800-642-1234. That's 800-642-1234. Or you can send us an email to talk@wpr.org. What are you seeing, or what are you looking for? And Jim, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Lee. It's great to be here.
Always a pleasure to have you, because space always makes me think. It provides the ponderous. You know, there is a great unknown out there that reminds me not only about how much we have yet to learn, but also my place in this world. That, you know, you remind yourself of how small you can actually be, and yet how important you can become.
That's one of the most valuable things about this is, it gives us many different perspectives on our place in the universe, but it's also just fun. And it has practical uses too, when you can look up into the sky and recognize a few constellations. So it's really
you can find yourself on this Earth just by looking at the skies.
You can indeed, yeah. You could just sort of be transplanted and look up into the sky, and you'd have some idea where you are.
And although I don't feel it, I know we're hurtling through space at like an ungodly speed.
Yeah, well. Right, all that kind of stuff, yeah. Right, yeah. It's you have to sort of separate out all those various sorts of things, because sometimes it doesn't matter that we're hurtling through space, and other times it does. It's sort of your frames of reference kind of things. But it does. That's an important thing about astronomy, is it does teach us to think in terms of frames of reference. Do we want to think about the Earth as a sphere that we're moving with respect to, or do we want to think about the Earth as a planet moving with respect to the sun, or do we want to think about the sun moving with respect to the galaxy? In order to understand a lot of astronomy, you have to be able to just mentally shift these frames of reference. It used to be something that I would emphasize in teaching astronomy, is that not only do you have to be able to do this to get a good grade on the exams, but it's fun. I mean, and it really is an important, I think, a sort of a grounding thing for people as individuals to understand where they are. And of course, one of the things that we talk about most in astronomy these days is where we came from.
Yes.
And in fact, the Madison Astronomy Department recently formed a couple of years ago what's called the Wisconsin Center for Origins Research, which is a multidisciplinary way of combining not just astronomy but other associated fields, chemistry and mathematics and a few other things, in order to address what are, in some senses, big philosophical questions, but they're becoming big astronomical questions as we discover more exoplanets, for example. Like, I don't know, 6,000, I think, is the number these days. We can begin to say that we know something about the distribution of planets. And when I was in college, there was, no other planets were known outside of the ones around our sun.
Our solar system was kind of the limit, and the debate was where Pluto fit into it. But beyond that, we found thousands of planets to look at, research, and figure out.
Right. So not only, just the fact that they're there was an important thing, but we're beginning to get to numbers now where you can make generalizations about what different types of planets there are, how typical is this one compared to another one, or things like that. So we still need to find a lot of planets, because 6,000 in the whole galaxy, where there are probably trillions of them, is still a small number.
We're just getting started.
We're just getting started.
Where does Earth fit in what we would expect from an exoplanet? Is this atypical so far?
So far it is, yeah. The search is very much on to find an Earth 2, they sometimes call it, to find something that looks like Earth as near as we can tell. Because it would be interesting to know whether we're typical. That most of the ways of discovering exoplanets are not very sensitive to planets like Earth. So the Earth is orbiting a relatively bright star compared to where we find most of them, and it's a relatively small, relatively small mass planet and a relatively massive star. So the methods that we have now are biased a little bit towards finding really massive planets around really little stars.
Easier to find the Jupiters and Saturns than the Earths and Mercuries.
The easier to find the Jupiters and Saturns, or even more massive ones, but around much less massive stars. They have that much more effect on the small star, a much more visible. It's a change in the spectrum of the star that you actually look for to detect the planet. So
as the planet moves in front of it?
Well, that's another method,
Okay.
yeah. That is that's called the transit method, and that is another way to find planets. But a planet like the Earth passing in front of the sun is harder to detect, compared to some other situations.
Which brings us to the lunar eclipse tonight, as the Earth passes
those are
between the
eclipses.
sun, and we will see it projected on the moon. How good of a view will Wisconsin have, by and large, given some clear skies tonight, Jim? How good will it be, and when will we see it?
Yeah, the weather does look promising for a lot of us, and it's going to be, as you say, it's a transit. The Earth getting in the way of the sunlight, falling on the full moon. So we're going to see the full moon tonight, and the Earth's shadow has an outer zone that we call the penumbra, which means partial shadow. Really, and then there's the deeper part, what's called the umbra of the Earth's shadow, which is if you were in the umbra, then the Earth is completely blocking out sunlight, and if you're in the penumbra, then you're getting partial sunlight, partial shadow. That penumbral start, when the moon first enters the penumbra of the Earth, will be at about 8:24 p.m. So that's it's a very gradual sort of event. It's almost unnoticeable. You stand there and you watch and think, yeah, I think maybe I'm seeing it. Yeah, I think so. Right. So that one is subtle, and sometimes some lunar eclipses are never any deeper than a penumbral eclipse, and those, be honest, I won't even get off the couch for. It's just so
not worth it.
It's not worth it. But then what's interesting is that about an hour later, 9:34 is the time I've got here, but just call it roughly an hour later, the moon enters the Earth's umbra, and that's total darkness, or close as it comes. And so there you see an actual darkening of the disk of the full moon. You see an actual little chunk out of it. Not quite, because you can still see the rest of the moon behind there, but you can distinctly see the edge of the Earth's shadow, that curved edge, and that's important too. We could come back to that, but so then that will be deeper and deeper until there will only be a little bit of the moon left unimmersed in the umbra, and that will be at about 11:13. Call it 11:15. So so it's kind of slow, nice and slow in a way.
Yeah,
you can just
about an hour and 45 minutes for it to get to almost full eclipse.
Yep. So, it doesn't matter if you're out at that special moment. It's a little bit different from solar eclipses where, if you go to a total solar eclipse, you can almost, blink and you'll miss it.
Right.
It's not quite that bad, of course. But minutes, we're talking about mere minutes of totality at a total solar eclipse, whereas these lunar eclipses are nice, slow events. So, no need to sweat exactly what time you get out there. Or you can just, like me, I'm going to set up a lawn chair and watch the whole thing. Well, actually, not the penumbra. I'll probably be setting up my lawn chair during the penumbra eclipse. But and then that totality, not the totality, that umbral eclipse, I guess is the right thing to call it, goes on until almost 1 a.m. 12:52 a.m. is. Now, the thing about most of these eclipses is they look the same going out as coming in.
Sure.
So you don't have to feel guilty about deciding it's time to go to bed at 11:30.
If you got to work tomorrow.
Yep, exactly. But that's if you're gonna do the whole thing. Then the partial eclipse ends at 12:52, and then there's the penumbral. So this is just happening in reverse of how it developed at the beginning. Not until a little after 2 a.m. So So if you really, really wanted to say you saw it from beginning to end, that'll be quite a commitment.
It's like 3.5 hours.
Is that what it is? Boy, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
And this is a lunar eclipse that much of the world's going to be able to see, but will they be able to see it as completely as you're describing it for us here in Wisconsin?
It's going to be the same pretty much anywhere on Earth you see it. Yeah, it's the shadow covers the whole Western Hemisphere, so all of South America, and then way up into Canada. I forget where the cutoff is. It's in northern Canada, so most of North America as well. So yeah, the only difference will be how high in the sky the moon appears as you're looking at it. So if you go further south, if you go down to the equator, the moon will be quite high in the sky. We're going to be seeing it low in the southeast to south during the. Relatively low. Now, low enough, in fact, that I can't watch it from my backyard. My neighbor's house will definitely block it out.
You're going to need to find
I'm going over to a park. Yep.
Orton Park.
A park.
Okay.
No, not a particular park, but yeah. But
is there a good? I mean, is it like star watching? Do you need to find a dark place to see this, or
not in this case?
Okay.
I mean, it is a long eclipse, so a lot of as lunar eclipses are, so a lot of people do like to do some stargazing as you're kind of waiting for the eclipse to dawdle along there. But no, you don't need to find a dark sky. But it's nice to have a dark sky. The one thing that will happen as the moon gets nice and dark, so the full moon will pretty much wash out the Milky Way, even if your urban lighting hasn't already done that. But if you're in a dark location, even a full moon will make it almost impossible to see the Milky Way. But during the deepest part of this eclipse, it's going to look pretty good. So
stars are going to start lighting up.
They're going to really show up in numbers. So so that might be a motivation to go to a dark sky. But no, you don't necessarily need to. So if you can see it from the balcony or the back porch or wherever you are, if you can see into the south, relatively low into the southeast sky, then you can see it.
All the way until about 2 o'clock this morning, starting at about 8:24 tonight to be precise.
8:24, I'd say the most interesting stuff, though, is closer to 9:30.
9:30 until about just before 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yep. And I mean, if I were advising anybody who wanted to minimize the amount, the time commitment, I would say 9:30 until 11:15 is just about is the most interesting.
Did we have a solar eclipse earlier this summer? Was there some? I don't know if we had it here, but there was a solar eclipse earlier this summer.
Just 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Yep. Which is not coincidental. They happen. Solar and lunar eclipses happen
together,
2 weeks apart in pairs. Right.
Why is that?
Typically pairs. Well, so we're talking about an alignment. Either it's for a solar eclipse, it's an alignment of the sun and the moon and the Earth in that order. So the moon is getting in the way of the sunlight, right? And in the case of the lunar eclipse, the alignment is sun, Earth, moon in that order. So the moon is moving through the Earth's shadow, right? So imagine a solar eclipse. You have to have a near perfect, doesn't have to be perfect, but a near perfect alignment because the shadow of the moon on the Earth's surface is pretty small. It's about 100 miles wide, maybe, something like that.
Yeah.
Depends on the eclipse. If you're not in that location, that narrow track on the Earth, you don't see the total solar eclipse. So it goes by kind of quick, but that's going to be as close as possible to your perfect alignment. So now 2 weeks later, the moon has gone from new moon at the solar eclipse to full moon on the other side.
Yeah.
But that the Earth and moon have moved in their orbit around the sun a bit, so the alignment can't be perfect anymore. So if you get a total solar eclipse, then you'll get either 2 weeks before or 2 weeks after, you'll get a partial lunar eclipse. And if you really get a great central lunar eclipse, then either 2 weeks before or 2 weeks after, you'll see a partial solar eclipse somewhere in the world.
So all these heavenly bodies are moving through space at astronomical speeds, but they're all moving in concert. I mean, they're all through as gravitational forces pull and push each other. There is a science or math to it that seems to be a universal language, an astronomical language.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the problems like predicting, say, a solar eclipse were beyond the science of astronomy. Astronomy is a very old science, but not until really Newtonian gravitation came along. So we're talking the early 1700s. Could people start making accurate predictions about where on Earth you might be when there's a solar eclipse, when there's a total solar eclipse. And that's because of understanding of that, all those interactions, those gravitational interactions, which in the case of the Earth and the Moon and the Sun are relatively complex, still a fairly complex problem. Not that it isn't solved at this point,
right?
But it helps to have some computers cranking away on these things to get accurate predictions of.
And also gives us an idea of those exoplanets way out there beyond our solar system.
A different kind of eclipse.
But still the same
transit.
math, though, right?
Well, right. So they look at at a transit. They look at it. They look at a transit there and derive what information you can about it, and try to derive the orbit of that planet. What is that like? Now, the other method gives you a little bit better. The radial velocity method gives you a little bit better information about that. Tells you a lot about the orbit quite directly, but doesn't tell you as much about the planet. The transit part, they can actually see as the planet, an exoplanet crosses the star. You can see changes in the spectrum that tell you about that planet's atmosphere.
Oh, wow.
Now, the radial velocity method doesn't tell you about that. So these things give us different, depending on which method you get different information. But you try to put it all together into understanding of we're quite familiar these days with stellar systems, I guess I should really say, of half a dozen or 10 planets sprinkled out in different distances around their stars. So the teasing out the various sort of signals that we can get, and various signals in the spectrum are mostly what we're talking about here, but also just in the overall light of the star. When you get a transit, it's a tiny, tiny fraction of the star's light. Putting all that stuff together is a whole subspecialty of astronomy these days that didn't exist really 25 years ago.
Jim Lattis, our guest, you probably can figure he's the former manager of the Washburn Observatory. Should also mention his book, Chasing the Stars, which details the legacy of the UW-Madison Washburn Observatory. With the lunar eclipse getting set for tonight in Wisconsin, clear skies depending, and it's looking like we're going to get there. If you've got questions for our guest, you can join us at 1-800-642-1234. That's 800-642-1234, or send an email to talk@wpr.org. So as we get to this near full solar eclipse tonight around...
Lunar eclipse,
thank you. And that is about, 11:13 you said?
Yeah, deepest eclipses, 11:13.
That's when our stars will be most vibrant, most bright.
Yep. And right, with any luck, we'll see the Milky Way arching overhead. I don't think that little bit of moonlight is going to be much different from a moonless night. Mm-hmm. So this is a great time of year for the Milky Way. The summer Milky Way is very rich compared to the winter Milky Way. We see the other half in the winter sky, midwinter sky. So here we are in the summer, and the rich Milky Way stretches. Depends on exactly what time you go outside, later or earlier, but from all the way from the north, where it passes through Cassiopeia, which is a constellation a lot of people know, up high in the sky across something called the Summer Triangle. There are 3 bright stars up there, and the Milky Way passes right through them, and then down into the south towards the constellation Sagittarius, which is... When you're looking at Sagittarius, you're looking in the direction of the center of the galaxy. We're not at the center of the galaxy. We're out 2/3 or whatever out from the center. So where is that from where we are in the disk? Well, it's towards Sagittarius. So you can scan over there with your binoculars. You can't see it actually, but you're looking in the direction of the center of the galaxy over there, which is in our sky is going to be in the southwest sky before it goes down. In the evening.
Peer into the center of our galaxy.
Yeah.
Find Sagittarius and look deeper, and you will see.
If you could see in radio instead of optical light, if you could see in radio waves, you would see a bright source right down there in Sagittarius, because that black hole at the center of our galaxy.
Is that what's at the center of our galaxy?
Yeah. There's a massive, very massive black hole right at the center of the galaxy. Again, you can't see it. It's a black hole, but stuff is going on around it that produces a lot of radiation. And so you would see a bright thing down there if we could see it with radio eyes.
What are your feelings about apps for identifying constellations and what are in the night skies? You don't have to use them, but do they help others?
I do use them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I do use them. They're often very handy for a number of things, especially if like somebody asks me what time does something rise or set.
Okay, and you can just look it up on the app.
Yeah, sure, right.
You want to name any app in particular?
I use two apps on my laptop. I use something called Stellarium. Stellarium, and at stellarium.org you can download the version that runs on Windows and Macs and Linux on basically on laptops or desktop computers. Sure. And it's very capable. I use it a lot in preparing for these kind of things or in giving talks or something. But for an app, for a mobile device, Stellarium does make a mobile version. It's different from the laptop version, so you don't get quite the functionality on the mobile version, but it's free. And then there's another one that I like to use of the many that are out there. There's one called Sky Safari.
Sky Safari,
and there's also a free version of that. But then they have a couple you can upgrade, to a couple of different levels. So normally I upgrade to the next level because that lets me control telescopes with that software.
What? Wait.
The free version won't control your telescope.
But you can control your telescope with the app and then coordinate the two.
Yeah, it's really great. You can do things like indicate on the screen where you want the telescope to point in the sky, and it'll go right over there. Or you can give it the name, a catalog number or something like that of an object or a star. Give the app that information, and and it'll steer the telescope over there. So, but yeah, you got to pay a little bit extra, and then Sky Safari is constantly bugging me to upgrade again.
Oh,
so,
yeah. Well, that's just part of the app process.
Part
There's
of the whole
nothing you
world
can do about
that kind of thing. Yeah. So those are my preferred apps. There are a number of them out there. The one thing I don't find so useful, most of them will do the thing where if you hold it up,
into the sky.
Yeah, right. Then it tells you, it says, "Oh, this is where you're looking," or whatever. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I never find that particularly useful.
I can see where an astronomer might not.
It's so hard to relate what's going on in that little screen to what's actually out there in the sky. But if it helps you, great.
You got this little 5 by 7 inch screen versus infinity and beyond out there. So how do you apply the two? Yeah. I'm afraid I'm a constellation novice. I can find Orion just about any time, but the rest of them I kind of struggle to. I mean,
you can find the Big Dipper, right?
Big Dipper I can do, and Orion I can do, but the rest of them I kind of need some sort of guide to get me there.
Well, so what we usually teach is those constellations that you do recognize. So you look up there and you see Orion. You use that to find your way to other constellations, so the ones that are immediately around it. Like Orion's belt will point you one way, it points to Taurus, and in the other direction it points to Canis Major. So you use the thing you already know to star hop. They often call that star hop around to other spots in the sky. It's not hard. We should go out stargazing.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I just didn't want to say it out loud. And then, when you say it like that, star hopping seems like I could get started on this at any time. Maybe tonight with the lunar eclipse wouldn't be a bad place to start.
Take a little star chart out with you. Yeah, in fact, I think I mentioned in the notes, you can get a free printable star chart from skymaps.com.
Skymaps.com.
Yeah, go to skymaps.com, download their free star chart, and print it, and then and you're all ready.
I can start with Orion and then work my way.
Not tonight. Orion will not be up tonight. Sorry, but you can start. You can start with you can start with the Big Dipper over in the.
There you go. I can find that. I can get started, and you can too at skymaps.com with the lunar eclipse tonight across Wisconsin and beyond. Our guest is Jim Lattis, taking us through space itself. We still got the planets to talk about because some of those can be found in our night sky as well. And any questions you have at 1-800-642-1234. That's 800-642-1234, or email talk at WPR.org. We'll continue to peruse the heavens next. I'm Lee Rayburn. You're listening to WPR News. Don't miss that lunar eclipse tonight, and the umbra portion will take place from about 9:30 till just before 1 o'clock, and we'll get near total eclipse at around 11:13. Spoken like a radio guy. Around 11:10, I think, is how most people say it. I'm radio guy Lee Rayburn. We're here with space guy Jim Lattis, former director of the UW Space Place, former manager of the Washburn Observatory at UW-Madison, and author of Chasing the Stars, the story of the legacy of the Washburn Observatory. And you're welcome to our conversation about space today at 1-800-642-1234. That's 800-642-1234, or email talk@WPR.org. Let's go to Suzanne in Madison next. Hi, Suzanne.
Hello, I have a story I'm very fond of about the Big Dipper.
Yeah.
And I was in northern Wisconsin with wonderful friends. I'm sorry, northern Minnesota with wonderful friends. Out in the late night with a couple of them, and we were all staring up, laying on our backs in a boat, looking up at the sky, and we were all really quiet and meditative. And the one friend says, "One thing I've always been pretty proud of is I can always find the Big Dipper." That's the story.
Thank you, Suzanne. And I can relate to your friend immensely, because the one thing I can always find is Orion, but sometimes it's not even there.
But well, Big Dipper is a great place to start. Could he or she actually find it? Sometimes it's pretty low in the sky, but out on a lake, you're probably in good shape.
But you can use star mapping with the Big Dipper the same way.
Sure.
Just you find your your constellation that works for you, and then you can work your way around the night sky from there.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Diane in Madison emailed to say she can predict where the sun will rise, follows it south and then north throughout the year. However, the moon seems to rise anywhere it wants. Sometimes it's far south. Then Diane sees it rising well to the north. Jim, is there an overall easy explanation that describes the position of moonrise throughout the month or year?
So no, it is complicated, but there is. I mean, it's well established. So the moon's orbit is tilted a little bit with respect to the sun's motion, about 5 degrees, and so the moon can rise further south and further north than the sun. Can rise. So you will see moon rises that are much further north than the northernmost sunrise, for example. And then that pattern shifts. The two orbits. So when I said the sun's path, it's really the Earth's orbit,
right?
But the two orbits, the moon's orbit and the Earth's orbit, about 5 degrees difference. But then those two orbits shift with respect to one another. So where the tip north or south is actually moves over a period of about 11 years. And so so you see differing patterns of how different the moonrise is from the sun. And then over the that's called the motion of the nodes of the moon's orbit is what the astronomers call that. When the nodes have come all the way around, the pattern will start over again.
So there is a pattern.
So there is a pattern, but it's relatively complicated compared to the sun's rising and setting.
That's an easy one to figure as the Earth moves around it, but then you've got the moon moving around the Earth, which is moving around the sun, and that can...
Yep, you have to keep all those straight.
Which an astronomer can do, or maybe an app can help you with that. But Diane would like to figure it out for herself. But there's some guides for you, Diane, and I hope that helps. Planets in the night sky, Jim. Some of them easily seen by the naked eye. Some of them better seen with maybe binoculars or a telescope.
Definitely, yeah. We have the brightest one. In fact, it's pretty close to its brightest right now. We have Venus. If you look in the sort of the twilight sky, I don't know, like about 7 p.m. or something like that these days, I guess. If you let's see, I was just going to tap on it here because I've got stellarium going right here. It's at about magnitude -4 or brighter, so it's pretty bright.
Yeah.
Venus is close to its brightest right now. So if you look over there in the southwestern sky just after sunset, while the sky's still sort of twilight, there'll be a really, really bright object over there, and that's Venus. So it's easy to find.
Well, it's still too early for stars, so if you see a bright object after dusk, you've got to figure it's a planet.
Yep. That's probably a pretty good rule. Yeah. So yeah, Venus is gets brighter than any of the rest of them. But then it's interesting if you do in the short time, it's not going to be above the horizon very long because the sun has just set there and Venus is going to go down. But if you can get a telescope on it, it's kind of interesting right now because it looks a little bit like a quarter moon, like what some people call a half moon. It's not a full disk. Because we're seeing Venus's orbit is inside of ours. So we sometimes, in fact, about half the time we see its night side and its daytime side in some mixture, which is why we're seeing the
so we get Venus at
thing that looks like the phases of the moon.
Yeah, it's got night and day, and we can see both night and day on the planet.
Right. There's whatever the side facing away from the sun is the night side, of course. Same with the moon, the phases of the moon. We're seeing the night and the day side of the moon. But things that are outside the Earth's orbit, like say Mars, we can't see behind them.
Sure.
So we never really see the night side. So Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, none of them do phases the way Venus does. So the phase of Venus right now is kind of fun to look at if you got a small telescope. But then that's our only bright planet until a little bit later at night. Let's see, Saturn rather is I think already up at sunset, but it's pretty low. Let me just see if I can check exactly when it rises. This is of course where the software comes in really handy. But Saturn, of course, is everybody loves to look at. To look at Saturn, and
through the telescope you can see its rings, and I always thought that was the neatest thing.
Yes, and so you want to. Looks like no, it's not going to rise. I need another hour. Here, 7, 8. Yeah, so it's rising around 8 p.m., but it's pretty low on the horizon still. So 9 or 10 is better by then. In fact, I just noticed. I hadn't noticed this before, but that's set for. That'll be tomorrow. A couple of days from now, the moon, the waning gibbous moon, is going to be real near Saturn. So if you wait until like Sunday night,
that'll be
Saturn
easy to find.
Yeah, Saturn will be just right below the moon. Anyway, Saturn is fairly easy to find because there aren't any other real bright stars over there. Now it's not as bright as Venus by a long shot, but it'll be fairly prominent over there in the eastern sky. Say I'm getting about 10 p.m. I'm getting it high enough above the horizon there. So yeah, you can find Saturn. Look at that with your telescope. But then all the rest of the planets. I should say really the other two that we typically look for, which are Jupiter and Mars, they're rising in the early morning before the sun.
Okay.
So you got to be an early morning
or a late night,
or a late night. Yeah. I mean, it's. Let's see. We could just check that real quick here.
But is Jupiter like Saturn? If I were to look at it through a telescope, would I get some detail on the planet?
Yes. Oh, yeah. In fact, Jupiter is a lot of fun to look at through even a small telescope. Even binoculars, if you can hold them good and steady, will show you the moons of Jupiter. So it has 4 bright moons, which are often called the Galilean moons, because that's what he discovered with one of his earliest telescopic discoveries. Was that Jupiter has these 4 bright moons orbiting around it. And you can see those easily with a small telescope. But like I said, even binoculars if you hold them good and steady. But it's really fun to look at. If you follow up a little bit, if you look at them the next night, you'll see they've all moved. So you can actually see the orbiting happening if you look night after night, which is what Galileo did. He sketched the order, looked the next night, sketched them again, next night, sketched them again. And what he first thought were stars in the background, he said those things are actually orbiting around Jupiter, which we're talking 1610 here.
Yeah.
In 1610, the rule was everything orbits around the Earth.
That's right.
Yeah. So this was, anybody could see it. Anybody could see it. There's stuff orbiting around Jupiter. So the Earth is not the only center of motion in the universe.
Well,
that was a big moment in astronomy.
Yeah,
Sorry?
that's a tough argument to make in a world that thinks that it is the center of its universe. You're facing an uphill battle on that one.
Yeah. It took a few centuries to get that.
I was going to say, there is a lesson to be learned in there somewhere, but we'll save that for another day.
Right. It's but it's fun to look at that. You're kind of reproducing a very important historical moment, the recognition of what something's going on in the universe out there. And
it always seems so unreal to me because it's so far away, and yet when you look at it through a telescope, it is right there in front of you, and it feels like it makes it real, but it's still.
Yeah, well, one of the objections, about the only objection that people could make to Galileo was, well, you must have built those into that telescope somehow. That's not
the moons are part of the lens,
right? There's somehow, or you made it wrong, and there's reflections or something. But
for
anyway,
amateur astronomers, Jim, when you talk about telescopes, do I need to spend hundreds of dollars? What kind of a telescope would I need in order to enjoy the night sky, in order to see Jupiter's moons and Saturn's rings? What would you recommend?
So a fairly modest telescope would do either of those things. We used to sell, they're out of production now. There used to be a thing called a Galileoscope that I think the magnification was about 25 power, which is a little stronger than typical binoculars.
Yeah.
About double what typical binoculars would be. And that telescope showed you Jupiter's moons quite easily.
Okay.
And it was easy to put on a camera tripod. So anyway, those things are hard to find now, but a pretty modest telescope will do Jupiter's moons, and Saturn's rings are a little bit more of an ask, but not much. They're a little bit hard for, say, binoculars to see Saturn's
But I'd be
rings.
looking for about 25 times magnification or thereabouts?
At least,
At least.
Although magnification is the issue with things like planets. It's not so much the issue with other star clusters or nebulas, things like that.
Those are so far away that'd be tough to get close to.
Well, they are far away. They're much lower light level, and so what you need there, then we begin to talk not so much about magnification, but what we call aperture. That is how large the lens or the mirror of your telescope is.
Well,
so
that sounds like you're talking about price.
Well, yes. So you can find kits and things like that. At least there used to be kits out there for a couple $100, something like that. But I don't. But these days, to buy a complete one is probably a lot easier than building your own. And I think around $300 you can get a type of telescope. There's a particular configuration called a Dobsonian telescope.
Dobsonian.
Yeah, and so if you look for a Dobsonian, I think probably around $300 these days. Prices have been going up, so I'm not really sure where they stand right now.
But when you talk about aperture, you sure do make a good case for an observatory like the Washburn Observatory, which has, I think, open hours where people can visit if they want.
It does indeed, and so that's what I was actually going to say that about Jupiter was if you get a chance to look through the Washburn telescope at Jupiter or Saturn.
Yeah.
That'll knock your socks off, and you're not going to have a that-sized telescope in your backyard. So, the Washburn Observatory has been open to the public. We're very proud that started in 1881, and the policy was that it would be open to the public on the first and third Wednesday nights of the month. This is pre-Wisconsin idea time, but it was already the astronomers established that policy. They wanted to share Wisconsin's observatory with Wisconsin's people. So, first and third Wednesday nights of each month, if the sky is clear. And then during the summer, actually, they expand that to every Wednesday night, June, July, and August. So we're getting towards the end of that. So in September, it'll be first and third Wednesday. So, you watch for what might be a clear night and go up to Washburn Observatory on the UW campus.
Fun field trip.
Great. Yeah.
Very different kind of date. I think it would be a wonderful opportunity
I would think it would be a great date. Yeah.
Jim Lattis is our guest. He's a former manager of the Washburn Observatory on the UW-Madison campus and wrote the book on it, Chasing the Stars, The Legacy, which details the legacy of the Washburn Observatory. Want to invite you to the conversation. I have some emails here to get to, but you can call us at 1-800-642-1234. That's 800-642-1234. Kate and Ephraim emailed to ask if, Jim, if you're familiar with a Connecticut Yankee in the King Arthur's Court and what that has to do with astronomy.
Well, I suppose, yes, I am. And I suppose the question is referring to the episode there in that book where the Connecticut Yankee happens to have an ephemeris in his pocket, and he knows that on the date that he's there's going to be a solar eclipse. And so he uses that to impersonate a magician. I'm going to make the sun disappear if you don't do what I want.
But there's a bigger story here about how what we don't understand we can attribute to magic, but the deeper we get into space, the more we understand. And while it is... and the more we understand, the magical the science seems to be.
I have a friend who likes to say knowledge is always better than ignorance. And so the Connecticut Yankee there has leverage because he knows what's going on and everybody else doesn't. But it's interesting, though, Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens, swiped that from none other than Christopher Columbus. Who
really?
Actually, there was an episode, I forget which of his voyages, maybe the second, not the first one. Right, and he used it to intimidate the native inhabitants of the island where he was trying to get supplies and food and things like that. And he had an ephemeris. He had the latest version from Europe. This is 1490 something. He had the latest ephemeris, which allowed him to predict not a solar eclipse, but a lunar eclipse. And he did exactly what the Connecticut Yankee did. So Samuel Clemens picked up on that and changed it into a solar eclipse for the Connecticut Yankee.
Isaac emailed to shout out UW Stevens Point's Blocher Planetarium. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, the planetarium down there. Yeah.
They have Sunday shows in the afternoon, and the professor who runs it is amazing, very informative, very interesting. They also do stargazing at one of the sports fields on certain nights of the week. Cool stuff for folks who are around Stevens Point, interested in the space, in the stars, and everybody is at some point to some degree because it is still that element of mystery.
The planetariums and observatories are really great, and if you got one nearby, another thing, if you're interested in astronomy, there are a lot of astronomy clubs around the state. Madison has the Madison Astronomical Society, for example, which I'm active in. And you can often find an astronomy club nearby you who will have an observatory and have telescopes and things like that. And they often will, for special events, maybe it's a meteor shower or an eclipse or something like that, they'll have a star party of some sort. So they're great resources too.
Dark sky is also an important resource when you're talking about stargazing, and that seems to be something that is becoming less and less common. And you understand the importance of this, but anybody who wants to be able to stargaze would understand the importance of this. You are going to some pretty dark skies this weekend, as I understand it, up north to the Copper Falls to give a guided tour.
Wisconsin has some really great dark skies, especially up in the north.
Yes.
Right. The dark sky movement is really important, and International Dark Sky Association. I should have mentioned that. So thanks for bringing it up. I'm going to be up at Copper Falls State Park doing a Universe on the Park program on Saturday night. So I'm looking forward to that. Also up north, have an actual dark sky preserve at Newport Park over there in Door County. And then we have a, Rib Mountain. There's a dark sky preserve there. And let's see, there's another one that I was trying to think of. They're trying to get organized. Anyway, these things are cropping up where people are paying more attention now to, all it really takes is, for the most part, is just lighting, making appropriate choices when it comes to lighting.
It's another conservation movement, isn't it?
It often amounts to conservation in two ways. One is that a lot of the irresponsible lighting is wasting energy because it's just beaming light up into the sky where we don't need it. But the other conservation aspect is wildlife, because the lighting really affects a lot of wildlife in various sorts of ways. So the dark sky preserves, I think, are really important, and it's encouraging to see people paying more attention to that these days.
Jim, Mordecai emailed to say he has visual snow syndrome, which means he has a fine-grained, moving, mostly transparent static over everything in his field of view, so he's visually impaired. It doesn't bother him much except when he's trying to stargaze. It's difficult for him to tell if some of the tiny points of light are stars or a static from his visual snow, especially in places with more light pollution, as we mentioned. Any advice for what Mordecai can do about this impairment? Because he would love to be able to watch the stars.
Ooh, that's a tough one. No, that's pretty far outside of my specialties.
Are there other ways to... I mean, are there, like, you talked about radio waves and stuff like that. Are there other ways to perceive our night skies?
Well, one thing that, still sticking with the optical, there are amateur radio telescopes, but maybe there are a number of new telescopes out just in the last few years that have integrated cameras in them. And so you actually control it, say, from your iPad, and it creates an image which it transmits to your iPad. So you see it on that screen much, much brighter than it would have been if you were looking, say, through an equivalent eyepiece.
Okay.
Now, it's doing other tricks, too, like taking multiple exposures and stacking them up and things like that.
And I imagine it saves these images as well. So you can go back and look at them, maybe clean them up if you have to.
You can definitely do that. Some of the new ones will even do things like automatically create mosaics. So something that's too big for the telescope, it'll take a bunch of them and then stitch them together.
Something you did at the observatory, didn't you?
Well,
something like that.
Vaguely like that. Yeah. We're pretty low tech. The Washington Observatory is pretty. We're talking 1879 here. So.
I've got a couple minutes left, but I want to get to Tom in Spring Green before we're done. Tom, hi.
Hello, this is Tom, and I was an assistant scoutmaster, and we went to Starved Rock in Illinois, and there was an amateur observatory group that was there, and one fella, he said, "You see Orion?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, look on one of the legs. We're on the upper, the lower of that leg, and look through the telescope. And what do you see?" And I looked and I saw a galaxy. And he said, "That was the Andromeda galaxy." I thought it was really amazing because it was something in which that, like you were saying about Galileo, we aren't alone.
Well, so the Orion Nebula, I think maybe you're thinking about the Orion Nebula in the constellation Orion. The Andromeda galaxy is kind of on the other side of the sky from that. So, so not in the constellation Orion. It's in the constellation Andromeda, which is why it's called that.
But the idea that it gave, Tom, I mean, just that image, that view led to a whole world of
the Orion Nebula
possibilities.
Is really closely studied because stars and worlds are forming out there in the Orion Nebula. It's the closest star forming region to our part of the galaxy. So it's been much studied, and easily visible in binoculars, by the way.
Before we're done, we had a caller a couple weeks ago who asked about the Kessler syndrome. Are you familiar with this? The idea that there's so many satellites in the sky that they could begin to have a domino effect and impact each other. Are you concerned about the amount of lower Earth orbit satellites and its effect, like the dark skies, on being able to observe the stars?
Yes, I certainly am. There are. It's not just the number of satellites. There's one project that wants to put a huge mirror up there to beam sunlight down into the night. And I don't know. I guess they'll sell you some sunlight or something. It's a little bit crazy because the plans for putting satellites up, the numbers are just huge, and it means you'll never look up into the sky and not see satellites going by. And whether we would ever have that avalanche effect that you're talking about, that would be a true cataclysm. I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows what density of satellites you have to get to before that kind of thing can happen.
We know that it's getting more dense out there.
Whatever
we know
it is,
that it's getting harder to get past that, to get to the stars and the sky and the planets that we can see. although at least we'll still have our lunar eclipse tonight.
That's right. That's right.
Jim Lattis, what a pleasure. I want to invite you back, and I want to thank you as always for joining us and sharing your love of space.
Happy to do it. Thanks
it translates. Even if I can only find Orion, the rest really speaks to me.
We'll work on that.
I'm looking forward to it. Jim Lattis is the former director of the UW Space Place, former manager of the Washburn Observatory, and now retired as a faculty associate in astronomy with the UW-Madison College of Letters and Sciences. The lunar eclipse tonight, beginning at 8:24 and rolling all the way till about 2 a.m. with the big parts, the umbra portion, as I learned, from 9:34 to 12:52. I'm Lee Rayburn, and you're listening to WPR News. Do you know how much fiber you're getting? Do you know where you're getting it from? Do you know what it means for your body, your health, your longevity, everything about you? I'm Lee Rayburn, and our next guest is a UW Extension specialist and associate professor in UW-Madison's Department of Food and Nutritional Sciences. Beth Olson joins us once again, and if you have questions about fiber, stories about getting enough fiber, what it takes, where it comes from, you are welcome here at 1-800-642-1234. That's 800-642-1234. Or you can send an email to talk@wpr.org. And Beth, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
So let's start with the different kinds of fiber, because not all fiber is the same, is it?
No, and if you look at a packaged food that has fiber, they'll list the different types often. So there's total fiber, but there's also soluble and insoluble labeled. And the soluble is a more viscous fiber, and the insoluble is less viscous. And they have different effects in our GI and therefore different effects on our health.
Is this the important part, our gastrointestinal tract?
Yes. Decades ago, when I first got in the field and started studying fiber, we just thought fiber was roughage, just stuff
Filler.
Stuff that went through, didn't, came out the other end and really didn't have
Had
anything.
nothing to do with anything with the rest of your body.
Exactly.
How long ago was this?
Oh, well, you're
I'm sorry. That is the running.
you're
I've
asking
already-
me a few decades, we'll just say.
Yeah. We've come a long way in a few decades, and I'm sorry I had to use you to make my point. I apologize, Beth. But so it used to be we just thought it went in, it came out, and that's that. But since then, we've come a long way in understanding exactly the importance that fiber plays in our diet.
Yes. So even just in that passing through of the gut, it affects how quickly we digest and absorb our food, whether we absorb it all. It also feeds the bacteria in our gut, which we have learned are very important. Part of having a healthy gut and our health overall is very popular now, called the microbiome. And they ferment some of the fibers and use that to replicate and outcompete bacteria or other things that wouldn't be good in our gut.
So we're talking about decades. In just the last few decades, we've understood the importance of fiber. But when we're talking about the microbiome, that seems like really relatively recent nutritional science.
It is, and it's just exploded.
And just starting too, right?
Yeah, yes. I mean, I think those of us in the field knew about the bacteria quite a while ago and began to realize, okay, this is important. But in terms of linking it to many of the disease conditions or to overall health, that's been more recent. And the explosion of the popularity of selling things to help your microbiome, that's pretty recent.
So when we're talking about soluble versus insoluble fiber, break it down for us. Which one do I want to focus on, or do I want a balance of both, or does it matter on what I'm looking for?
I think you want to balance. There's no requirement for one versus the other. And actually, most foods containing fiber have both.
Okay.
So there are some foods a little more rich in insoluble. That would be, for instance, wheat products, wheat bran, wheat cereals, wheat breads. That's a particularly good source. Also, if you kind of think of that rougher idea, the skins of fruits and vegetables that you can eat that would be a good source. Whereas the soluble is also in fruits and vegetables. So see, you can get both in one food.
Nice.
But it's also particularly high in things like oats.
Oats would be
Yes.
the soluble fiber.
Yep.
And you kind of want a combination of both, but no matter how much I think I get, I'm probably not getting enough. And you see it on packages in stores, high fiber, and you look for it in cereals and in your breads now, more common than not. But in your years of research, Beth, has our fiber intake changed?
Yeah, unfortunately not. As we learn more and more, and especially with this popularity of the microbiome, I would hope our intakes would go up. One of the reasons it doesn't is our food patterns haven't changed a lot in terms of getting the foods high in fiber. So fruits, vegetables, the legumes, some of the whole grains, intakes of those are still well below what's recommended, and that's why our fiber stays so low, too.
But I feel like we've been hammering on this for a long time. This part doesn't feel like anything new to me.
No, it's not new. And I think maybe that's some of what hurts us is, people are like, well, I've heard that before. I've heard fruits and vegetables and whole grains.
Yeah.
Beth said that a million times and every time she's been on a show. So it's not, I want to say it's not as sexy as some of the other things you see for nutrition and health. Eat this, take this supplement, you'll have nice hair. There are a lot of ways to promote other products that we aren't as good at when it comes to whole foods.
Fiber supplements. I can still eat the same way I always have with a few supplements on the side, and I'll get my fiber that way, Beth.
Well, you would get your fiber in grams. You wouldn't necessarily get the same health benefits because fiber-containing foods, again, as I said, there's all kinds of different fibers, not just the soluble, insoluble, but there's different types within those categories that are different among foods. And the foods high in fiber bring along vitamins, minerals, antioxidants. They're often higher in water, lower in fat, just overall good for you.
Which is why
And
you
won't
talked
get-
about them so much.
Yeah, exactly. You just won't get that with a supplement.
So could I... Supplements seem like the easy way. They seem like the shortcut.
Yeah, and they have a role sometimes. Sometimes working with a physician, someone may discover that they have an issue and it helps to take a fiber supplement. Psyllium is a very common supplement,
Yes.
often used for keeping regular. People
AKA
who are
Metamucil. I
Yep.
think you can get them in pills as well,
Yep,
but
you
that
can
seems
stir
to
it
be
up
the
in a
most common
drink.
one.
Yep. And, for some people who are really struggle not to be struggle with constipation, something like that can be helpful. And other people use it actually for some medical reasons. If for some reason their gut's moving too quickly, psyllium, because it's kind of gel-like, binds up water, can help slow that up a little bit and make it a little bit more normal. So there are reasons people, usually working with their doctor, use supplements.
So it would be something to consult with my doctor with and make sure they're cool with it.
Yeah, and definitely drink water when you're doing it.
Okay.
It binds up water, so you want to make sure you have a lot of that water in there.
So we've got soluble and insoluble. You want both, but how much do I want to get, and what have we figured out in terms of recommendations?
Yeah, so the same organization, the same governmental advisory group that gives us our recommendations for vitamin C and calcium and everything else has one for fiber as well. So for women, it's 25 grams, and for men, it's 38 grams. The actual recommendation is grams per 1,000 calories that we eat. So if you're a bigger person, the idea is you would be eating more calories. If you keep those fiber-dense calories, if you will, you'll need more fiber or take in more fiber. And if it's less, then you'll eat less fiber. So this would be common as people get older and maybe their calorie level falls a little bit. They might require a little less fiber.
Oh, interesting, because for me, when I was growing up, fiber was a part of my grandparents' diet, but not mine. As a kid, I didn't think I needed fiber so much, but as, older adults, my grandparents knew the importance of it.
Yeah, exactly. And kids do need fiber. Actually, one of the most common ailments with small children is constipation.
Yeah.
And having a high fiber diet
Sure.
can help with that. So there are recommendations from the same organization for kids because it's based on, again, calorie intake and an adult marker of heart disease, lowering that risk, it tends to be a pretty high amount, and most kids are not anywhere near that. So the American Academy of Pediatrics uses a different recommendation. They call it age plus 5.
Okay.
So say your child is 5, they would be 5 plus 5, 10 grams of fiber for them. By the time they're 15, that would be 15 plus 5 is 20. By the time they're 20, so you see it helps graduate a child up in fiber level
Until they get to
the adult level. So
But
it's
that
one
sounds
way
like
to
an
try to.
awful lot of fiber.
Well, 5
What do
or
most
10
people
grams.
get? Do you have a ballpark figure for adults? What do most people get for fiber in a day?
Average is between 15 and 17 grams.
That's
So you
not
can
even-
see, if you're a man, you'd be less than half. If you're a woman, not
About
quite.
half.
Yeah.
So, what would you recommend to make up the difference? How can you modify my lifestyle without changing it? Can I make a few improvements? Can I tweak a few things? I don't want to change everything, Beth.
Sure, and nobody wants to. And, we always say do it over time. Don't go from
Okay.
15 grams to 36.
Baby steps is a theme we've heard this week. A little bit at a time.
Take the baby steps. So you might just look at each meal. Okay, I have rice. I'm having a stir fry, and it's on white rice.
Mm-hmm.
Brown rice would have more fiber.
That's it?
Yep. So, you might start with just substitutions like that.
Okay.
You might consider some of the sources of protein that you have. Say something like meat.
Yeah.
It's an animal product. Fiber's only in plant products. Could you maybe cut the meat portion down a little and add a plant protein like quinoa or lentils or beans?
I feel it would be more affordable that way right now.
More affordable, good source of protein, got minerals, great alternative. But the other thing besides the meal is looking at, can I just add a little here and there, and can I look at my snacks? So a common way I've thought about it is if you eat meat sandwiches, turkey sandwich, ham sandwich, every sandwich, look at whole grain bread maybe instead of white bread,
Sure.
a slice of lettuce or a piece of lettuce, a slice of tomato. Right there, you've
want me
added
to
a
make
couple
the
grabs.
whole sandwich right there. But that's like a full sandwich. That's what you would go to one of
Yep.
the sandwich stores to get. They'd stack it up for you tall and thick.
Yeah,
So,
put on a bunch of vegetables. Sprinkle nuts or seeds over your salad if you have salad, adds a little bit more. And think about your snacks. Now, if you just want to maybe upgrade your whole diet, if your snack usually at night is cookies,
yes.
maybe an apple.
Maybe apple cookies?
Not quite.
You got to try. Come on. Looking for compromise.
So there you get fiber, but you also get other
How
nutrition.
about apple with peanut butter? That's kind of a...
That would be a great one. You get a little protein with
Yeah?
the peanut butter. It's got a little bit of fat. It'll empty slower in your stomach along with that fiber, keep you full.
Oh, you kind of
It's actually one of my favorite snacks.
I was going to say, you kind of have a deal with that one.
Yeah.
I could move to
It's
that.
one of my favorites, yeah.
All right, I like where we're going with this. Celery with a little bit of peanut butter, that could be a
Yep,
thing as a
exactly.
snack. You
Yep.
got a way to replace my potato chips?
Oh, gosh.
You mentioned nuts before. I kind of feel like
Yeah, you
we
could look at also like whole grain crackers.
Really?
They would have some fiber in,
Okay.
still get some crunch, but not have as, maybe not have as much fat.
I feel like you want to put a fruit or vegetable on top of that.
Yeah, that's where we're always falling short. Fruit and vegetables.
So things like meats and cheeses aren't going to cut it when it comes to getting any sort of our daily fiber content?
Nope, animal products just don't have it. They have their own role, are good for us, high in protein, but nope.
I've got a question here about GERD and whether or not certain high fiber foods can trigger the GERD-like symptoms and whether or not there's a way to compromise these two.
Okay, that's a little bit more medical question because GERD's
Okay.
a medical. So I don't know for individuals. That'd be something to ask their doctor. If your stomach empties a little slower, that can contribute to heartburn.
Okay.
So, but overall, fiber makes your whole gut move along. So I think in the long term, it may be helpful in that it just keeps things moving. In the short run, maybe you would need to be a little bit more careful about not taking in a big bolus of fiber at once.
We are going to be talking about having too much protein at the bottom of the hour. Beth Olson, I'm curious, is there such a thing as too much fiber? And would you know it if you got there?
I think the only way you're going to get too much fiber is using supplements. If you think about the fiber-containing foods, fruits, vegetables, if you sit down, to have a snack, are you going to overeat on apples? The fiber, the water, the chewing, you just end up full before you can take in too much. I think the one that people who, if they're not used to eating it, is there are fiber-containing foods, beans primarily, that do cause gas.
Yeah.
And people will say, I had too much of that because it caused gas. It's a side effect. It's
discomfort.
Yep. So you might want to be careful there that you don't overdo it on that in your first try.
You really push the fruits and vegetables, Beth.
Yes.
Beth Olson is our guest, and we're taking a look at fiber and the fact that I'm not getting as much of it. And I thought I was, and that maybe you aren't either. If you have questions for our guest, she's the UW Extension Specialist and Associate Professor at UW-Madison's Department of Food and Nutritional Sciences. You can join us at 1-800-642-1234. That's 1-800-642-1234, or send us an email to talk@wpr.org. Vernon Boyd called in to say apples and pears are high in fiber but can have pesticide residue on their skin. He suggests pumpkins, raisins, and oatmeal as safer sources of fiber. Pesticides would be a question, Beth.
Yeah. So what I feel is most people eat so few fruits and vegetables that the benefit of increasing their fruit and vegetable intake will far outweigh any residues of pesticide that are present. If someone is very concerned, they could choose organic, but I think the benefits are so great to using fiber-containing foods that I personally do not worry as much about the pesticides. Doesn't mean in the long run we don't want to try to be careful with pesticides on our crops. That's somebody else's topic, I'm sure, but not being indiscriminate, but
personally,
I do think
do you buy organic if you can afford it, or is that something a luxury?
I don't often buy organic. I've not felt the price has been worth it. Now, I'm finding increasingly, particularly out of the produce aisle, say in the packaged food aisles, that some of the store brand organic foods, or sometimes they're on sale, either place, are the same price.
Yeah.
So, then I go ahead and do it.
If the price is equivalent, you go ahead and you would go organic.
Yep.
That makes a lot of sense to me, but also being price conscious at the grocery store right now makes a huge amount of sense to me.
Don't forego, a vegetable because you can't afford the organic. Go ahead and get the other.
Yeah. What about when it comes to nuts and beans? Are these all the same for fiber? Are there nuts or beans that you would recommend above or beyond others?
No, although I'd say, one thing about beans is canned beans is really a convenient source. You don't have to boil beans on the stove for
But then again, bag beans are
time.
very, very inexpensive.
They are. So if you have the time to boil them. The other thing about the canned beans is they're shelf stable, so they're quick. So you're making a salad. You could drain some garbanzo beans and put them on top. The only caveat I usually give about nuts is they are higher in fat. So if you're watching your calories, adding a cup of or a half cup even of nuts is going to add a fair number of calories. You're going to need to watch that. So I think using them a small amount as a snack is a great idea. Put them in a trail mix, and then using them, a little bit as a garnish. Sprinkle them over a salad.
Sure. I'm actually gonna +1 you here on, Beth.
Okay.
When it comes to alternatives for nuts that might work when it comes to fiber, some roasted chickpeas with your favorite seasoning on top. A little ranch seasoning maybe, or a little seasoned salt or whatever you like on top of that. A little oil you rinse them, you dry them off, get them a little oil bath, and then you put them on some high temperature for a little bit. You get some crispy critters that have some fiber in it.
Yep, I have a recipe for that at home. It's an excellent one to do. And, nowadays I would put in a plug first, you can do them in something like air fryers. There are a lot of things you can do now with the appliances that we have to do things quickly.
And that way you can get your fiber and your snack without your fats and no chips required, but still get some crunch.
Yes, exactly.
Let's go to Larry in Sugar Camp next. Larry, hi.
Hi. So my question is, I have been on a generic. I use Walmart sugar-free Metamucil for years and years. I'm on it for medical reasons, and I just switched to the true Metamucil to see if it was any better. It's a lot more expensive, and I feel like I've got a lot more gas. Is there a difference between these, like the generics and the true Metamucil, as far as what's in them?
I'm not aware that there is. I mean, they're pretty much psyllium, which is a fiber. It's possible, I don't know this is true, it's possible one is a little bit differently processed than the other. That might make it a little bit more fermentable, which would change the effect.
But if your body's not reacting well to it, if it's creating discomfort like it is for Larry, you could go back to the generic and save yourself a few bucks. Part of this is listening to your body, right? Seeing how your body reacts to the foods and feeling when you're feeling good, feeling when you're feeling bad, and recognizing that it's garbage in, garbage out, and you've got to adjust accordingly.
Yeah, exactly. Often people say, well, I tried this, it caused this, or I ate this and I loved it. There are many, many, many foods, many, many versions. Pick the ones that work for you, both for price and the effect on your body and taste and all of that.
And we talk about this a lot with healthcare, is how individualized it's become. And I imagine our bodies are unique, and diet would be the same way, that you just listen to you and find out what works best for you.
Exactly. The dietary recommendations are for, all healthy people.
Right. And they're generic averages.
Exactly.
And those generic averages don't exist in the real world. We're all these weird, unique individuals.
They're a good starting point, and then from there you figure out what
frames
works
of
for you.
reference.
Exactly.
Thank you for that. And Larry, thank you for the call. I hope you're feeling better. Ted and Madison emailed to say if the larger goal is to get people to eat more fiber, he doesn't think we should be downplaying supplementary fiber. Unfortunately, most Americans are addicted to convenience, which is part of the reason we eat so poorly. Ted goes on to say those who are willing to supplement are also often those who would not be willing to change the way they eat.
Yeah, and I think one of the things to do is look for, are there convenience foods high in fiber? So again, take those food labels. You're going to eat a breakfast cereal. That's very convenient, very quick. Look at the label. Does it have 0 grams of fiber in a serving, or does it have 2, 4, 6, 8? Same with breads that we just talked about. You could get a white bread or you can get a wheat bread. You're buying them in the same aisle. They're just as quick. So I think there's a lot of things that we can do that would be more convenient, even among the foods that we're choosing.
So just being mindful at the grocery store as opposed to having to try to be mindful once you get everything home.
Exactly. Yep.
What about popcorn?
Popcorn's a great source of fiber. Favorite snack of my mother and therefore of myself. And
low fat?
Low fat. Same thing. You can add a little seasoning if you want, a little ranch seasoning. I had a friend who used to put in a little bit of cinnamon and dried fruit bits. It was almost like a trail mix in the popcorn. So
cinnamon. I would think maybe kettle corn, but then you're adding sugar. But cinnamon to straight up popcorn?
Yep. A little bit of cinnamon with a little bit of fruit bits that you can get.
Dried fruit
bits. Yeah, it was a great recipe.
Let's spend a moment more on microbiome. It's another, sort of burgeoning field, but you've known about it for a long time. How does fiber interact with that in a way that makes our body feel the way we do? Well,
the bacteria in our gut ferment the fiber, and they make products that we do absorb that do seem to regulate our metabolism in some ways. So they've been different microbiome. What we see most often is when people look at the gut of people who are in a disease state, their microbiome often looks different than someone who is healthy. Now, what to do about that is what we're not quite clear on yet. Did the disease cause that microbiome change, or is the microbiome causing the disease? If you alter it, do you alter the course of the disease? Maybe, maybe not. It is actually pretty hard to significantly alter your microbiome. It's affected by more than your diet. Your environment, the people you're around, everything. And so you can change it with your diet, but you have to keep that diet change up. And it's only going to change so much. So as a field, I think it's promising, but really in its infancy, of us knowing exactly what to do to change it to have a specific outcome.
But we do know that fiber is beneficial and for all parts of our gastrointestinal system, and we should probably get as much as we can in the best ways we can find it.
Exactly. You see a lot of expensive supplements saying that it'll alter your microbiome, and I just think go back to the basics of, these whole foods high in fiber, and you might have the best effect on your gut that you can.
Fruits, vegetables, beans, and whole grains, popcorn with some cinnamon on it with some fruit bits inside. I'm going to try that and have to get back to you, Beth.
Yep.
Hey, thanks for joining us today.
You're very welcome.
We'll have to do this again because I've got some work to do on my end, but we can catch up and I'll let you know how I'm doing.
Sounds good.
Beth Olson, UW Extension Specialist and Associate Professor in UW-Madison's Department of Food and Nutritional Sciences. I'm Lee Rayburn, and you are listening to WPR News. There's protein lattes from Starbucks, protein popcorn from Khloe Kardashian. There's even protein water, protein Pop-Tarts. You name it, they've put protein in it. But really, how much is too much? And what does the latest science say about all this protein? I'm Lee Rayburn, and our next guest is one of the authors of a recent study published in Peer Reviewed that looked to answer this question. And if you have a question about protein, our intake of it, how much is too much, and its impact on our health, you are welcome to our conversation at 1-800-642-1234. That's 800-642-1234. Or email talk@wpr.org. Dudley Lamming is a professor in the Division of Endocrinology, Diabetes, and Metabolism with the Department of Medicine at the UW School of Medicine and Public Health. And Dudley, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Lee.
So set this up for us a little bit. Your study actually looked at hundreds of other studies to analyze the protein's effect on our health. How did you go about it?
Well, this was actually a review, by some scientists written for other scientists. So we were reviewing both human studies as well as a lot of studies that's been conducted in animals and even in fruit flies over the last 10 to 20 years about dietary protein levels and health.
So when it comes to protein, it seems like this is a recent marketing push. Was there a point where we were generally not getting enough protein? Where did this protein push come from, if you could speculate, and why is it everywhere all of a sudden?
Well, protein has a lot of really great qualities. So, one of the things that is really attracted people to protein for at least 2 decades, maybe probably even longer, is the fact that protein promotes satiety. That is, it helps us feel full. And so, studies since the time of World War II has sort of suggested that different types of fat might be bad in the diet, and that we should cut down on particular types of fats like trans fat. And, more recently, people have thought that we're eating too many sugars in our diet, particularly particular types of sugars, and that we need to cut down those as well. And so to balance that, people have said, oh, we should eat more protein because that helps us feel full. And that's definitely true. Protein does promote satiety. And many people are familiar with the fact that protein helps us build muscle, particularly when we're doing certain types of exercise. And many athletes and people who are trying to build muscles take extra protein supplements. Many people who are over the age of 65 are also advised by their doctors to increase the amount of protein they have because they're fighting something called sarcopenia, which is age-related muscle loss that can increase frailty. So protein has a lot of beneficial qualities.
But I would imagine then that you are looking at what the sweet spot would be in general for people and their protein intake. And it also sounds like that might vary on age and current health?
Yeah, so this is something that I started looking into around 2014 because a couple studies started coming out. One was analyzing data from NHANES, which is a very long-running NIH study of the human population. for many different factors. And something that was surprising to me that came out of that study was the fact that they found that people who are eating more protein were actually at higher risk of age-related diseases like cancer and diabetes, and actually had a higher risk of mortality as well. And so then we started looking into this, and it turns out that this has been a signal that's been found in many different studies from around the globe, that people who tend to eat more protein are at higher risk of cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and other age-related disorders, even though we think of protein as something that's good for us and should be promoting health. So we're really interested in trying to dive into, what's behind that.
So, what did you find in terms of what is behind this? Because, on one hand, you make a good case for the value of protein. On the other hand, the science shows that there could be some age-related illnesses that could be exacerbated due to protein intake.
Yeah. So, to sort of cut a longer story short, I think protein is beneficial, and it's particularly seems to be beneficial in people who are exercising. And this is
Okay.
something that we've been able to explore with animal models, where we see that mice eating a higher protein diet essentially are more metabolically challenged. So they grow more fat mass. They seem to be becoming less able to regulate their blood sugar. But these effects are ablated by exercise.
Hmm.
And so, when we think about how much protein we should be eating, one of the things that really seems to be critical of that is to take into account this activity. Are we using that protein in our diet to build healthy skeletal muscle or not? And when we look at the general population, the majority of people, in America and many other developed countries are overweight or obese, probably not moving enough. And that seems to be a case where maybe in that general population, more dietary protein might be harmful and metabolically challenging, even though when it's combined with exercise, it can lead to better health outcomes.
So, yeah, and one of the things that we regularly hear from folks who are interested in better health is regular exercise and making sure that you keep that body moving. And I think that's pretty much across the board. And it also sounds like that seems to be part of the outcome of the conclusion of your study here, Dudley, that in order to have a healthy amount of protein, you have to have a healthy lifestyle that includes some element of exercise.
Well, I think it's very clear that many different studies have shown that a certain amount of activity, even a certain amount of walking, can be very beneficial for health and for aging, in particular for not becoming frail as we get older. So I think that's beyond a shadow of a doubt. Some of the other things that we were sort of investigating in this review was looking at the role of the building blocks of protein, which are called amino acids.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are 20 of these amino acids in the diet. 9 of them are essential for humans as well as for mice, where we conduct a lot of these studies. And the amino acids that we've really tended to focus on are the branch chain amino acids, leucine, isoleucine, and valine. And these are familiar to a lot of people in the context of health supplements, because a lot of protein supplements that people take, if they're athletes or bodybuilders, really focus on these BCAAs. They're thought to be particularly important for building strong muscles. And what we found there was that a lot of the metabolic effects of protein that seem to be negative are mediated by these branch chain amino acids. And so if we reduce dietary levels of just these branch chain amino acids, we were able to extend the lifespan of mice as well as improve their health span. So keep them from growing as frail as they got older.
So these BCAAs, these branch chain amino acids, you say they're most likely to be found or most commonly found in things like protein supplements, and this seems to be one of those proteins, am I getting this right, Dudley, that would have a negative impact on aging and age-related illnesses?
Well, so branched amino acids are found in all foods.
Okay.
So all the amino acids are essentially represented in some amount in all foods. Branched amino acids are generally thought to be high in lots of different types of meat, particularly red meat.
Oh.
But they are essential for life. So you definitely need some of them. Very bad things happen if you don't have enough of any of the essential amino acids. But it does seem that in the context of can we restrict them in the diet,
Yeah.
keeping them at a sufficient level rather than at a level of excess. And in our mouse studies, we found that by reducing the levels by about 60% in our studies,
Ooh.
we find that that leads to mice that live longer. So male mice tend to live about 30% longer. Females don't benefit as much, as well as being leaner, better able to control their blood sugar, remaining fitter as they grow older, so not getting as frail. And in Alzheimer's settings, we actually see that we slow the progression of Alzheimer's disease in mouse models of this disease.
Oh wow, Dudley. So this also affects the one of these something dementia that we've been talking about potentially, at least in these mice studies. But a 60% reduction in these branched chain amino acids, that's a drastic reduction, isn't it? So what's the practical, what does it look like practically if I were to reduce 60% of these branched chain amino acids?
Yeah, this is not something we'd necessarily recommend people to try at home. And the fact of the matter is, it would be very difficult to design a diet that led to that level of restriction. There's been about 5 or 6 human studies of protein restriction, which has essentially restricted protein by about 50% in humans. And so, as you might imagine, those involve switching from sort of a conventional American diet to a diet that contains a lot more components, a lot more oils and Mediterranean type foods. But trying to cut out as much meat as possible, maybe include some fish or something like that. But the fact of the matter is, we're not necessarily advising people to try and reduce the amount of protein in their diet. I do think that as you sort of alluded to at the beginning, there's a lot of foods now that are protein supplemented. And so, about the idea of people taking more protein without increasing their exercise, that could definitely be something that's approached with more caution.
Dudley Lamming, our guest, professor in the Division of Endocrinology, Diabetes, and Metabolism within the Department of Medicine at the UW School of Medicine and Public Health. Taking a look at he's one of the authors of a study that we're looking at now that studied the impact of protein on health. It was a review of more than 350 studies that was published at the end of last month. You can join with your questions or your stories about protein at 1-800-642-1234. That's 800-642-1234, or email talk@wpr.org. As Stephen Wanakee couldn't stay with us, he said he understands that older people lose the ability to metabolize protein and thus need to consume more. If that's the case, how much protein should you consume as you age, Dudley?
So there's a couple reasons that people who are older tend to be advised to eat more protein. So one is that many people who are older tend to have less of an appetite. And so in terms of absolute amount that they're eating, that goes down. And so increasing the percentage of that food that's protein just to meet their sort of essential requirements is important. It's also generally believed that a lot of people who are on a fixed income as they grow older spend more of their money on carbohydrates because carbohydrate calories are cheaper than protein calories. So, essentially that meat can be expensive. So a lot of elderly people are thought to be protein insufficient and are eating too little protein to maintain their current muscle mass. And so that's definitely a very potential risk. So that's something that, needs to be approached on sort of a case-by-case basis, with someone's doctor.
Joanne emailed to say it's ironic that the essential amino acid methionine is added to poultry and animal feed. Now they say too much is being added, according to Joanne. Could that lead to higher mortality of people who eat chicken?
So methionine is one of the essential amino acids, and it has a variety of unique roles in metabolism. And studies starting around the 1990s showed that restricting methionine could extend lifespan in rats. That's been shown in mice as well. And methionine levels are low in some particularly long-lived groups of individuals. Doing that in the diet tends to not work very well. For restricting that in the diet tends to not work very well for a variety of reasons. But definitely, people are using that as a tool to understand how amino acids and metabolism in general are regulating healthy aging. So, methionine, again, probably the specific level of any one of those amino acids could be, potentially problematic. But I wouldn't want to say that, there's a particular problem with, methionine in chicken as opposed to anywhere else.
All right. Thank you for the email, Joanne. And when we're talking about protein supplements, the way it's being shoved into lattes and popcorn and Pop-Tarts and delivery pizzas, Dudley, is that a different kind of protein? And does that have a different effect than like natural foods like meats and dairy? And does that have a different effect or impact on our health?
It's potential that it could. We have not done too much work into the sources of protein as a regulator of health, but many other groups generally think that protein from meats are worse for your health than protein for plants, and there's definitely evidence to suggest that. But when you were talking about these natural sources, it's confounded by a lot of other factors. For instance, all the different metabolites and things like fiber that you were talking about earlier. Right, plant material obviously has a lot more fiber associated with it, which could be beneficial. So we think, generally speaking, that's about the amount of protein rather than the source.
Okay.
But source could potentially play a role, particularly because of things like fiber and other metabolites that are associated with it.
So what are some high protein plants that I could look for, Dudley?
Oh, that's a good one. People usually ask me what are foods that are low in branched chain amino acids, and that one I could tell you. People in general think that turkey is relatively low,
Huh.
as well as emu, which interestingly,
I'm sorry. Did you say emu?
I did. Interestingly, there are some emu farms in the Midwest. So hopefully I'll be able to visit one someday. I understand there is a guy who sells emu sometimes at the Capitol Farmers Market here in Madison every Saturday.
And that might be a beneficial meat to try if we wanted to lower our branched chain amino acids?
Potentially, but I think we'd probably have to farm a lot more emu if we were going to do that.
Julie from Green Bay called to say that she's 61 years old, who has run 4 to 6 miles a day for the past 25 years, and she was wondering how much protein should she be consuming.
Well, I don't want to give a specific number for a variety of reasons, but certainly seems like, she's very physically active and is getting older, so probably would benefit from more protein than someone who was sedentary.
That sounds about right. And to me here, it seems like the crux of the argument has to do with your lifestyle, that the decision about how much protein to get is kind of dependent on how active you are, Dudley. Is that a general takeaway I can use from your work?
Well, there's a variety of other factors that probably are important too. So we found that, for instance, men and women, or at least male and female mice, tend to respond differently to protein. And this could be dependent on estrogen levels as well. And so, we think that sex could definitely play a role in the response to dietary protein, and that's something we're interested in. And then genetics seem to play a role as well. And so, I think a more comprehensive assessment would be that, the amount of protein that everyone would optimally get probably needs to be personalized based on activity for sure, but some of these other factors as well.
I saw that you were included in a story a few years ago in WPR News about a research you did into calorie intake and fasting and how that impacted age-related illness and the potential for longevity in mice.
Yeah, so that was a really interesting story. So it's been well established that calorie restriction extends lifespan in organisms from yeast all the way up to non-human primates. And calorie restriction studies have been done in humans as well and shown beneficial health outcomes. But one of the things that one of my students noticed a number of years ago is that calorie restricted animals are fed once a day. And so they tend to binge eat and consume their food because they're hungry. And then basically they eat all of their food in about 3 hours, and they spend the rest of the day without any food. And, time restricted feeding had become very popular probably about 10 years ago as potentially a lifestyle that would enable people to cut calories with more easily, and maybe have other beneficial health outcomes as well. And so what we found in that study was that fasting period is super important. When we fed animals using other dietary regimens that sort of stretched out the period where they ate food, we could reduce calories, but if they didn't have that fasting period, they didn't experience the benefits of the diet. And so they didn't have improvements in their ability to regulate blood sugar. They didn't necessarily live longer. They didn't have cognitive improvements as well. And so that fasting period was super important. And then conversely, we were able to actually reproduce a lot of the benefits by not cutting calories, but just compressing food intake into a short period each day. And this sort of time restricted feeding study has been done by a number of groups now in humans. And they found that generally it is true that you do get health benefits in humans if you compress the food intake interval to about 6 hours a day. That seems to be primarily driven by a decrease in calories that you consume. So basically, you can't overeat as readily if you have to eat all of your food in 6 hours.
Dudley Lamming, how has your research affected you personally? I mean, do you avoid protein-infused products when you go to the grocery? Are you a plant-based diet when you can do it? Are you eating emu burgers?
I have been wanting to get some emu burgers because I'm very curious about how they taste, but haven't managed to do it. I think this is a really interesting question, right? Because there are a lot of researchers who are studying diet, are asked about. And some people I've met definitely really adapt their diet, to the things that they're studying. I personally don't. I think like most Americans, I find it very difficult to adhere to sort of restricted diets with so many wonderful, delicious food options that are available. Particularly in Wisconsin, right? So, so that is definitely an issue. In the long term, right? I think that it's probably not realistic to expect people to, have to map their diet around like limiting protein or limiting specific amino acids. The long-term ideal would be that, we use this as tools to find new mechanisms that maybe we can inform our, what type of foods that go into the diets in general. Like, do we supplement protein into all these different types of foods or not? And then more specifically, can we find, new medications or new ways of getting people some of the benefits of these diets without having to make dramatic lifestyle changes.
Let's go to Sheena in Green Bay next. Sheena, hi.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. You mentioned a couple minutes ago about there might need to be some tinkering with the protein level based on male-female. I'm a trans female, and I'm wondering how I should approach that.
That's an interesting question and not something we've explored directly. But we see that generally speaking, male mice tend to benefit more from protein restriction than female mice, at least metabolically, and in terms of their effects on lifespan. And in females, we've done some experiments that have sort of pointed to estrogen signaling as key in that. And so if we block estrogen signaling in the females, then they respond more like the males.
Dudley, we talked about your past work. We're talking about your current work. What's your future work look like? What sort of hypotheses are you wrangling next?
Yeah, so we're really trying to dive in now, both on terms of molecular mechanisms and figuring out what's mediating these specific things, specific effects of proteins and amino acids, so that we can work on translating that to humans. And then really sort of trying to piece apart this question about exercise and diet. What is the best combination of diet and exercise in terms of healthy aging? And we're working on that in preclinical models and then hopefully moving to human studies. Another really important question that we don't know the answer to yet is, is resistance exercise and aerobic exercise the same in terms of their effects? Or, would the best outcome be, a combination? And then how this interacts with age is also super important, because maybe someone who is in their early life, maybe they would get the best health outcomes long term with a different diet than someone late in life. And maybe diets need to switch over time.
Sure. With about a minute left, Dudley, Kathy emailed to ask if there's a blood test to determine your protein level, or how do you know if you are deficient?
Yeah, so your doctor can help you figure out whether or not you're protein deficient, sort of looking at different metabolites in your blood to suggest whether that's an issue. There are some very complicated tests that can be done in a laboratory setting, but are not available in the clinical setting yet to look exactly at what's happening to protein. Maybe that's something that if there's sufficient demand, might expand over time.
And the bigger picture here seems to be, we go back to the central theme that the individualization, yet you are a unique person, and that, what is right for your body is largely dependent on how your body responds to these things. But there are some things we know, the fruits and the vegetables and the exercise seem to be standard for everybody, Dudley.
Definitely seems to be. And yes, you're a very special person, Lee.
That's all I wanted to hear. Dudley Lamming, professor in the Division of Endocrinology, Diabetes, and Metabolism at the UW School of Medicine and Public Health. And I hope you'll join us again with your latest research. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks to you for being a part of the show. Thanks to our team, Clara Neipert, Joel Patinaw, Jeff Robbins, our executive producer, Jill Nadeau. I'm Lee Rayburn, and you're listening to WPR News.